Hi guys, and yes, you are in my freezer. Why do you think you are there? Because I want to talk about food and specifically about food waste. Okay, let me share with you some food statistics. 40% of all the food is wasted, lost or wasted. So it's almost half of the food is just thrown away. This amount actually costs us every year $1 trillion. And interestingly, if we took all this wasted food and distributed it to the regions where people are malnutrition, to the poorest regions where people don't have enough food, we could actually feed up to 2 billion people with this amount of food. So basically, we throw away the food that 2 billion people can eat. Well, let's talk about food waste. Recently, I just watched a documentary about that and I got really impressed and inspired. And I really want to share some very important information with you. Information that I think that if more people knew, people will be more responsible how they deal with food and also more responsible what they demand from other businesses, because it's not only what food I personally throw away, but also how companies in my country, how businesses in my country treat the food waste. So in this video, I want to talk exactly at what levels the food waste happens, so we all understand it better. For those people who are wondering why would I even care about food waste, I'm not throwing anything personally away. I will also explain why everyone has to be aware of what type of food waste is happening and why is it actually bad for us, for the environment, for our future, for the economy, even for everything. And of course, as usual, I will try to share with you some ideas what can be done in terms of food waste reducing. So basically, food waste happens at all levels: farmers, food industry, which is like producing food, transporting food, wholesalers, supermarkets, restaurants, catering companies, events, and so far and so on. And of course, at the level of households, all of us, we also throw food away. So let's talk by one. For example, farmers. Farmers are losing and wasting food because they often demanded to only supply our supermarkets with perfect produce. Apples that are looking the same, that don't have any imperfections, bananas that are looking the same. In the documentary I told you about, they even show that how in European Union they have a certain standard for how the banana should look like. So if the banana doesn't fit the standards, it can't be sold in American or European supermarkets. It just has to be discarded. This goes to all types of fruits and vegetables. Some of the farmers, they use this food for composting, but still some processes can be more efficient. So basically, farmers spend a lot of time to farm something, and in the end, there is never a chance for them to sell 100% of what they produce. In poorer regions, there is another problem that the food harvesting or food storage is not happening very efficiently, so there is lots of loss during the harvesting. For example, not all food is actually recovered, and also there is lots of loss during transportation or storage. Another issue that farmers meet, that they actually have to grow more produce that they know they can sell, because they don't want to end up with the situation when they can't cover the demand. So for them, it's always more convenient to grow more and just discard whatever is not demanded. Of course, it's not a farmer's fault to do that, but definitely us as people, as a community, as economy, we have to figure out what should be done to the produce that is discarded because it's imperfect or discarded because it doesn't meet enough demand. If we talk about retail, supermarkets, wholesalers, even the food industry in terms of production, there is a lot of food waste and loss at this level. As I said before, the supermarkets demand farmers and food producers to only supply them with perfect produce. And also at the supermarket level, every supermarket throws away a lot of food because they want their shelves to be perfect. So let's say if one fruit gets a little bit riper than the other, let's say the same bananas, they're gonna discard them for better image because they want the customers to come to the supermarket and only see perfect shelves. This is mostly the biggest problem for countries like US or Western Europe. For example, when I lived in Indonesia or when I lived in Egypt or even back home in Russia, you can easily find supermarkets where things don't even look good. And I remember one conversation I had with my French friend. He said, like, I don't get why here in Egypt they sell these ugly grapes. They look disgusting. Why do they even sell it? Back home in Paris, I can buy these perfect grapes. And for me, because I didn't grow up in the Western Europe, I was actually surprised because I didn't have that mentality. I was thinking like, I don't know, grapes are grapes. They're not rotten, they can be eaten. And here in America, I see people there don't even get why you would pay for something that doesn't look perfect. Which is not necessarily a bad thing, but at the same time, by only buying perfect things, like for example, when I go to farmer's market, I see people like picking fruits. They like grabbing it, jamming it, checking it, putting it back. So by this behavior, they also force farmers to only show the best produce. But then that means we are responsible for all this ugly produce, imperfect produce to just be thrown away. Another problem is supermarkets that throw a lot of food, that's one thing. But instead of donating this food to the food banks, instead of somehow sending this food as food for animals, they just throwing it away. Why? Because it's just cheaper, it's more convenient. Instead of figuring out how to send it, where to send it, they just throw away. Another issue in a country like America is that if you ask some like supermarket clerk, like, oh, why do you guys throw this away? He or she would probably tell you, oh, we can't donate it because we are afraid to be sued for something we donate, which is absolutely not true, because in America there is this Good Samaritan law where you can't be sued for donating something. Technically, supermarkets can easily donate things. There is no legal restrictions for them to do that, but they just don't want. Another thing, it's very rare in most supermarkets to see some discounted food. Yeah, you maybe see a little bit, but not that much, which is surprising for me, because in some countries you can always find this huge aisle where you get discounted food, 50% off, 70% off, 80% off, and people who buy it, obviously they understand, yeah, this food is probably, if it's produced, it's imperfect, or if it's like some packaged food, maybe it's expiring soon. For me, for example, I'm okay buying imperfect food or buying something that's gonna expire in a few days. If I know I'm gonna eat it now, why not? I would gladly save my money. But supermarkets here in US, they don't offer this option. You ask why? Because they don't want their customers to have bad experience. They want their customers to have perfect experience. That's why they choose not to do those discounts. The food industry, the way how the food is discarded there. For example, lots of food producers, let's say it's a bread maker. I don't talk about local bakery, but a huge production. So they're gonna put this date that will sell before, and most consumers would think oh, sell before, that means I can't eat it after because it's gonna be dangerous for me to eat. And this is absolutely not true. Sell before means this is the time when the produce is still crispy in its best shape. So what the production company wants, they want you to buy only perfect produce, so you have good memories of this company. Yeah, they have a good image. They would always put lower shelf life, date, yeah, for you to get it in a better time. But maybe if I am aware, let's say this date on the packaging would say, okay, the perfect time to consume in 3 days. It's still okay to consume it within a week. And also you can consume it within a month, I don't know, without, getting sick. So there should be more information on the label so consumers can take choices. Let's say for right now, I want the perfect one and I'm ready to pay a premium. But let's say I'm on a budget. I'm okay to eat something that's not gonna go bad. Maybe it's not as perfect as the day when it was made. So the companies choose to limit the shelf life, not because it's dangerous for you to eat, actually also because they want you to buy more. If it gets wasted, you will buy another one. Let's talk about restaurants. The biggest example of food waste is probably all kinds of buffets, all-you-can-eat restaurants. Because those restaurants, they have to produce a lot of stuff and they know that they're gonna have food waste. That's something they know, but that's how they work. So for me, for example, I'm considering now not really going to all-you-can-eat anymore because I don't feel like supporting food waste. But obviously, it's everybody's choice. What about other restaurants? For example, here in America, portions are maybe 1.5 or even 2 times bigger than in Europe or other countries. So when you get a bigger portion, you either eat too much and then you get too big, or you just actually leave food on the plate. For me personally, if I go to a typical American diner, I would never be able to eat everything. Most of the time, we try to take food home if it's something we're gonna eat tomorrow. But for most people, they just leave it on the plate because they know they don't like leftovers. They don't really like to heat up the food. They're not gonna have a chance to eat it tomorrow. So bigger portions that the restaurants have here in America actually lead to people eating more or wasting more. Also for restaurants, obviously they buy more ingredients than they actually need this particular day, and they throw away these ingredients. Why this happens? Because obviously they don't want to end up in the situation when something that the customer orders is out of menu. And this is really sad, because the reason why it happens is because us customers, we are really particular about getting certain foods. And of course, if we go to the restaurant, don't get our favorite plate there, we're probably gonna leave a bad review like, oh, I've been there, they don't even have these things on the menu. So for us, we have to be more patient and let restaurants sometimes run out of certain dishes, but not overstocking on ingredients they're gonna throw away. Another part of restaurant business is events and catering. Those guys waste a lot of food, and this is understandable. If you have an event that say gonna have 100 people, most catering companies would have the amount of food that is more than needed for 100 people, because they just want to be on the safe side. Okay, this is about businesses, but what about us, consumers, households? How much food do we waste? There is statistics that on the household level, which basically means you and me, we waste from 15 to 25% of food. So 25% is 1/4. Basically every fourth food item is being thrown away by us, consumers. I don't probably need to go into details how do we waste food, but let me just remind you of things like we buy more food than we need, especially if we have a huge fridge. We go to the supermarket, we just grab everything, and then we get home and then we realize oh, I actually had bananas already. Oh, I already had eggs and stuff like that. So we're not very responsible with buying, and we feel it's okay, I will use it up. No, and then I don't use it up. You're nah, it's okay, I just throw it away. It's not so expensive. Funny fact, when I came here to America, I realized that the fridge in most American households is at least twice bigger than in Europe, and probably 3 times bigger than in Indonesia, where I lived. In Indonesia, people have these tiny fridges. And I used to live in a house with a tiny fridge. First, I was super annoyed by it, but then I realized it's actually better, because if you have a smaller fridge, you buy less food, so you can actually see what's inside your fridge, and you are less likely to waste something because you don't have too much. So basically, how it happens with us consumers that we waste food. You just buy some things, or let's say we cook something, we cook too much, and then we think it will be just leftovers, and then we stuck this leftover somewhere on the lower shelf of the fridge, and 5 days later we're oh, we had these leftovers and we forgot about it. So we don't have habit to eat leftovers, at least not everyone does. And also sometimes we get too spoiled. We're because we're not hungry, most of us at least not, and we feel I don't feel like leftovers, how about I just order pizza or sushi or whatever. Another reason, as consumers, as I said before, we don't like ugly produce. People get weirded out if the apple is has a black dot on it. Since we are not hungry, since we are not limited on food, we actually easily forget about foods we have. We had something in the fridge, something that was perishable or just was sitting there too long, and we don't really suffer from throwing it away, because we can easily afford it. And because we don't feel oh, we're wasting money, we don't feel not wasting food. Anyway, the whole situation with food wasting is sad, and you would probably ask yeah, it's kind of upsetting information, but why should we bother? Should we really bother eating all the leftovers? And I would say yes, and here are my reasons. Here on this channel and in my daily everyday life, I actually ask myself every time is it sustainable for us as a planet to continue just wasting 40% of food and not doing anything about it? And I feel it's not really sustainable. That's why I'm sharing this information. And first thing, I already talked several times about the landfill on this channel. So when we throw away food, when it ends up on the landfill, there is a methane gas produced as a byproduct of those landfills. Methane gas is actually contributing to climate change. So by just throwing food away, we create more damage than, let's say, using transport. So everyone knows yeah, if your car is using gas, it's not good. Electric cars are better. But at the same time, if you keep wasting food away, it's almost pointless to talk about green energy when we're doing as simple as throwing away 40% of our food. Second, so basically think of those 40% we throw away. While this food was grown, produced, transported, we used energy, we used water. If we're talking about farming, we used lands. So all this was used up for nothing. So if you throw this food away, if you throw this 40% away, whatever was used to create that 40% was just used for nothing. Food industry is also a polluter because transporting, creating food, it contributes to CO2 pollution, to carbon footprint. So if we produce food that we eat, it's okay. But if we produce food that we're going to throw away, why do we even create this extra additional pollution? And there is other pollution too, plastic, which comes from plastic packaging, and so on and so forth. And the last is that we're just wasting money. 218 million is wasted on food that no one ever gonna eat. Well, you ask me what should be done. Technically, when we create some food or grow some food or produce some food, it should start with feeding people, everyone who's hungry. Second level is after we feed people, whatever is left should go to feeding animals. After we feed our animals, if we still have something left, we can use it for creating new energy or let's say for composting and so on. And of course, if something is left from this process, that little part should be sent to the landfill. In reality, it happens absolutely vice versa. Most of the food we have, we just send to the landfill. And only little goes to feeding animals, to creating compost, to creating new energy, and even to feeding people. We have so many people who are hungry in this world and we're still throwing food. It just doesn't make sense to me. And in reality, businesses have to be responsible. So if there is a supermarket that wants to get rid of food, they have to be responsible to delivering this food to people. Let's say food banks donate some food, deliver it to some farms that can actually use it. For example, in Las Vegas, there is this pig farm. They use food scraps to feed the pigs. Or at least they have to do something to make sure at least this food is composted and not goes to the landfill. Supermarkets and retail industries, they have to be responsible to help reduce the waste. Everyone. The same goes to other type of businesses like restaurants, catering. They have to donate food. And there should be more organizations that can actually take these food donations and distribute it among the people that can actually use it. In the documentary, I will list it below. They actually have some examples. For example, there is this guy who takes the food and has a for-profit organization where he sells this food to people who can't afford to buy this on the lower prices. It's actually a good business model because he's not just donating it or giving it to people. He actually makes them buy it. So there is some money generated, small amount of money generated that can actually be used up to create more businesses like that, to create jobs. Because people who work in the supermarkets, they have to be paid, yeah? So this type of business is actually more sustainable than just giving food away. In general, farmers and retail industry, they have to stop limiting imperfect produce. They have to sell imperfect produce to people, and consumers have to understand that there is nothing bad about oddly shaped banana or oddly shaped apple. And actually now here in California, I see already some initiatives when you can order this food box and they're gonna deliver to you some imperfect produce. Those initiatives are great, and there should be more initiatives like that. There should be more done in terms of food recycling. Some of the food can go into the composting, some food can go into the animals feeding. Another cool initiative is called food gleaning. For example, when the farmers harvest all the food from the fields, there is an initiative where people come and they collect whatever is left. This is probably the ugliest, the most imperfect produce, and then this food gets collected and sent to some social programs and distributed between people who are in real need for food. Another cool initiative is having farm-to-table delivery, when you buy directly from farmers and let's say you agree to buy whatever imperfect produce they have. On the consumer level, I'm gonna have specific video with all my, principles, what do I personally do and what can be done more than that by each person to combat the food waste, and this will come in a separate video. But here, let me just share few ideas. Of course, we have to be more responsible and avoid buying things that we're not gonna use. Of course, it's a long-term process. You have to start being more probably observant. What kind of foods you never finish, what kind of foods you always buy and it just gets bad because you don't have a chance to eat it. And maybe think of ways to avoid that. Find places where you can buy less of this food, or maybe do some food planning, meals prepping and stuff. Second thing, start buying Imperfect produce. In this documentary, they actually have like a cool couple. They're doing this experiment for 6 months. Well, they try to either find some food in dumpsters. I know it sounds crazy, but just watch the movie. It's actually is not as crazy as it sounds. Or they get some discarded produce, some imperfect produce. So they did this experiment for 6 months, and they show you how much actually still good-looking food is thrown away just because us consumers, we are too spoiled by demanding the perfectness, the perfection. What else can be done? If you are the person who always gets rid of some food, consider donating it to food banks. Find the nearest food bank and just bring there some unopened packaged food that you didn't eat. Or you know that, for example, you're going for a long trip and you know this food is not going to be eaten by you, so just consider donating it. Another thing that can be done is starting to separate your waste and start composting organic waste. This is something that I do already for maybe 5 or 6 years. I have a vermicomposter at home and all my organic waste goes into there. So basically in terms of food waste, like organic waste, I try to make sure none of my personal waste from my house goes to any landfill. Other things that we all can do, if we can find some good initiatives that help reduce food waste, we can voluntarily choose to support those businesses, those initiatives. You can even go and volunteer in certain projects, and I think as soon as this like social distancing and quarantine situation will be finished, I'm gonna research and find some cool initiative where I can volunteer, and I can even probably make a video about that experience. I don't know when it's gonna happen, but I hope it's gonna happen soon. Well, I guess that's it for today. In my next video, I will share with you my tips, what can be done, maybe some examples and ideas, what we can all do to reduce the food waste. Don't forget to subscribe. If you like this video, give me a thumbs up. If you have ideas or you have information about some cool initiatives, please post in the comments. I would love to know about them. And let's spread some sustainable lifestyle together. Anyway, thanks for watching and I hope you really like this video. Bye bye!